See to it, brothers, that none of you has a sinful, unbelieving heart that turns away from the living God. But encourage one another daily, as long as it is called today, so that none of you may be hardened by sin's deceitfulness. At the memorial for Jason Granger, 6 soldiers, right? 6 soldiers stood up and talked about Jason and the recommitment that he made to Jesus Christ just over a year ago. And what was really cool about what they said about that, and these are, okay, you need to understand that Jason is a ranger, all right? These are not wimpy guys. And Jason was like, I mean, he was bulk, he was man, he was tough and rough all the ways it goes back. He was the leader of his ranger unit. He was also a trainer of, a parachute trainer, right? So he taught people how to skydive. He did one of these things called halo training. He did rough terrain training. This guy knew everything he needed to know about skydiving and equipped other people to be safe in doing that. And he had 7 tours of duty in Iraq and Afghanistan. This is a man who, by accounts of his soldier friends, had rescued and saved several of them. And what was really cool is when they were talking about him, they talked about this change they saw in his life the last year. This was a man who by Jason's own statement, he says, we were in a situation where our whole, platoon, I'm always going to say it wrong, but our whole platoon was ready to be slaughtered. And he said, God, listen to this, God rescued us. He said, and this is Jason's words. Now, Jason's a guy, he was still rough in all the other kinds of ways. He partied and drank with all of his buddies in his backyard and all this kind of stuff, right? But yet he had a new relationship with Jesus Christ. And he said, God rescued us. These soldiers, as they got up there, they were talking about the difference they saw in this man. And what I really loved was the one guy who got up there. He had to wheel himself up there. He's in a wheelchair. And he's pretty salty. Right? Pretty salty. And he's challenging Sergeant Major to a strength test and stuff. and he's just talking to him straight. He says, guys, you want to know why Jason died? He died because of you. He died so that this day would happen. He died so that you guys would hear about Jesus Christ.
Amen. There you go.
Whoa. This is at the memorial, okay? These are all brothers standing up there. These are soldier brothers, folks. These are guys. In fact, you need to know something else about this young man who's saying this from the wheelchair. He's saying it from a wheelchair because of the wounds and the injuries that he experienced in the war. He's suffering from post-traumatic shock disorder. He tried to take his own life, and Jason challenged him to commit his life to Christ, and he did. You see, that young man was sitting there in front of them in that wheelchair and challenging these guys to stand strong like Jason challenged him and challenging them to believe in Jesus Christ. Encourage one another as long as it is today. Folks, we have a responsibility to encourage one another. As we're going through our mission statement, we are trying to understand what God has called us to do as a people. And yeah, we've used kind of a cute phrase, right? That we are putting legs to our faith, right? And the legs are what? Well, last week we took the first leg of that statement. And the first leg is that we are supposed to love God with our whole heart, mind, soul, and strength, and we're supposed to love our neighbor as ourselves. Everything starts there, folks. If we're not loving God, we're not going to do a very good job of loving one another. That's what these guys saw in Jason. They saw a difference because he had recommitted his life to Jesus Christ. He loved God again, loved him more, and that started affecting all these other relationships. And incredible. We need to love God, and we need to love our neighbors as ourselves. And folks, there's not one of us in this room that's doing that well enough yet. And you might want to say, well, Bill, I am. You know what? Good. I'm glad you're loving, but we're not loving enough. And I'm not saying that in a judgmental, critical kind of way. I'm saying that in a very serious way, that our world needs more love out there. And folks, this mountain, the desperation of people on this mountain to be loved is tough. We have people who come into this room here who need to be loved. And frankly, I got to tell you that some of them aren't very lovely. And I'm not talking about their looks. Some of us are porcupines. Have you noticed that? Some of us make it hard for other people to love us. We wait for people to come to us instead of us going to them. That's not being very loving, is it? Or very lovable. Some of us make noises. We are supposed to encourage one another daily. I'm going to try the clicker, Daryl, but I don't know if it's going to mess you up or not. I can't try it because you just did it. So here, let's play with it. Nope, it's not working because I can't go backwards. Can't go forward either. It's yours. So the writer of the Hebrews says the second leg, if you're loving God and you're loving your neighbor, then the second leg is because this is going to really come out of love, isn't it? You're going to encourage one another. These guys, there wasn't one of them who wasn't crying, right? One of these soldiers standing up there who wasn't crying. And you know the other part of it, what they kept saying was Jason loved us. Wow. Is that what you say about your commander? Is that what you say about a rough ranger? Who they're not supposed to feel, right? This go out there and they're a shooting machine, right? No, this man loved them. And so you had a whole platoon of guys that are there. And as this one young man was trying to say, he says, folks, and he even went on to say, he says, you know what? Jason should not have died. The amount of training he had, the amount of knowledge and experience that he had, and the height that he fell, the last piece there, when the parachute kind of fell in on him, and he was making maneuvers, he should have survived that fall. The medical doctors said he should have survived the fall. And here's what this young man said. The reason he died, again, I say it again, the reason he died was so that you, he's looking him in the eye, he said, so that you guys would make a commitment to Jesus Christ today.
Yes.
Because we are called to encourage one another daily. Do you know what the word there, encourage, comes from? It's the word parakaleo. Now, I don't use a lot of Greek words with you, right? But listen to this one. Parakaleo. Now listen to paraclete. Did you hear something similar? Parakaleo, called alongside, to be called alongside. Do you know who the paraclete is?
Yes, sir.
The paraclete is the Holy Spirit, called to come alongside of us. To do what? To encourage us, to be there next to us. You see, sometimes, and I know I've told you guys this before, when I get called out onto a scene where somebody has died, and I know little, if anything, about anybody except that I know I'm there because somebody's died. And now I got to sort through, meet people, connect and stuff like that, and find out who's most hurting, find out what the situation is, and then, like the 14-year-old that committed suicide the day after Thanksgiving. What do you say? What do you say to a mother who's sitting there and saying, he was acting strange last night. I tried to talk to him. I tried to ask him what was going on, and he didn't share. But he gave me a big hug and told me he loved me. And then he went and did that to my husband. And then he went and did that also to our daughter. What do you say when she looks you in the eye and she says, why? You know what you say? You speak with your arms, not with your words in that moment. You get beside her and you just hug her. We have been called to come alongside of one another like the Holy Spirit comes alongside of us. We've been called to encourage one another. So the paraclete means someone called in to help and to render service. It's the comfort that enables a person to pass the breaking point and not break. The Parakletos has a great background in Greek law. The Parakletos was a person who actually defended you in court. Now, this is pretty serious because when you went to court in Roman time, you were in trouble. And without a person who's going to stand there and defend you, you're already done. It's sort of a little bit like, the attorneys say today, call in your attorney, don't say anything, right? If you're arrested or something like that, I want my attorney. As soon as you ask for that, then they're not legally allowed to pressure you anymore, right? Why is it? Because we need that defender, that person who's going to come into the courtroom and stand there on our behalf. Who is the paraclete who goes into the courtroom of heaven on our behalf? Holy Spirit. So we encourage one another. Let me give you just quick a couple other definitions of the word to encourage. It means to call to one side. To speak to, which may be done in the way of exhortation, entreaty, comfort, instruction. To admonish or exhort. You see, there are sometimes, like what Jason said to this young man who tried to take his own life and was unsuccessful. He said, "You need to stand up." He's in a wheelchair, okay, so he's talking about something more than that, right? You need to stand strong and not give in to this, and you need to give in to Christ. I mean, that's exhortation, isn't it? That's not, oh, I'm sorry, you're feeling bad. In that moment, he knew he had to literally exhort him and exhort him strongly. It means to console, to encourage and strength by consolation or comfort. To receive consolation, to be comforted, to encourage or strengthen. And God says we're supposed to encourage one another daily. And what is the next phrase? So you do not sin. Encourage one another so you do not sin. In spite of the anonymity of the 12-step programs, are you aware that there's a very important piece in the 12-step programs, and it's very much not anonymous? It's about having a sponsor. And a sponsor gets right next to you, and they know when you're messing up, right? And they're going to point it out to you, and they're going to be pretty straightforward and maybe even salty in the process, because some of these guys are coming from lots of stuff, right? The sponsor is such an important part, to have a person that's going to work with you. It basically, if we were going to use a nicer term, we'd talk about an accountability partner. Somebody who's going to know you well enough that they speak truth into your life even when you don't want to hear it. And help you to stay on the straight and narrow. We are supposed to encourage one another so we do not fall into sin. He warns us in this text about spiritual insensitivity. The word there is spiritual hardness. When he says, in fact, look back at Hebrews 3. He says, "See to it, brothers, that none of you has a sinful, unbelieving heart that turns away from the living God." That is a heart that's got arteriosclerosis, or in my case, hardening of the arteries. It's a heart disease, folks, and it's a spiritual heart disease as well. But encourage one another daily, as long as it's called today, so that none of you may be what? So that none of you get heart disease. So that none of you fall into sin. Tony Evans says we need to watch out for spiritual insensitivity. Insensitivity sets in when Christ stops being real to you and you stop looking to him for your life. When you stop looking to Christ, unbelief sets in. Are you getting it? When you're focused on what you're doing your way with your strength and your power, you're not focusing on Christ any longer, and unbelief is starting to set in. Evans goes on, he says, when unbelief sets in, you become susceptible to what Hebrews says is the deceitfulness of sin. Insensitivity means you've lost your ability to feel. How do you know when you're being spiritually insensitive? Sin isn't as painful as it used to be. Uh-oh. Before, when you sinned, you were crushed. You had failed your Savior. You had the right heart attitude about your sin. But when spiritual insensitivity sets in, sin isn't that painful anymore. After all, everybody else is doing it. What hurts the heart of God doesn't hurt you the way it used to. This is a dangerous condition, which is why the author of Hebrews gives the Holy Spirit's warning. Do not harden your hearts as when they provoked me, as in the day of trial in the wilderness. And that's from Hebrews 3:8. And if you look in the rest of the chapter, Hebrews chapter 3, it's going to talk about how Israel has hardened their heart. They've left and turned away from God. And God says, I'm going to forget you because you have forgotten me. There's an insensitivity to sin that develops. It's the sin, incidentally, of the Corinthian church. Do you remember it? Stephen Olford says, the most deadly sins do not leap upon us, they creep upon us. William Sprague says, how insidious is sin? From small and almost imperceptible beginnings, it gradually makes its way until it reduces the whole man to its dominion and brings into captivity every affection and faculty of the soul. Sin first throws out the bait of pleasure and flatters its victim onto forbidden ground. Then it makes him the sport of temptation and does not give him over until he is fast bound in the chains of eternal death. Folks, do you know how much of an issue pornography is in this culture? Pornography is so available that men and women alike are in trouble with it. And giving in to its temptation, and then to its shame, and then into its guilt. And what develops with that? Pretty soon, an insensitivity. Have you noticed how much we've changed in the last 20 years? I know some of you are saying, I'm not 20 years old, so no, I haven't noticed, right? Allison, if you go back and you look at some of the television programs about 20 years ago, you'll look back and go, oh, those are goofy, dumb, funny things, right? You know? And yet back at then, they were doing some really nasty stuff. Today, you compare what we do today, and now you can watch Victoria's Secret on television, on normal TV, right? A whole presentation. What's Victoria's Secret special show? It's all about underwear. Okay, but it's worse than that. It's more than that. Let's not go there. We allow things and we watch things. R-rated today? R-rated today used to be XXX. Okay? But it's out there on the regular television now. Okay? Just regular television programs and stuff. We as a culture have grown insensitive to sin. Oh my. Oh my. We have grown so insensitive to it that we no longer want things to be considered sin. And I just remind you, one of the most disturbing things to me is the number of Christians who have sex outside of marriage. The number of Christians. I am saddened by the fact, and I've done, a few hundred weddings, but I am saddened by the fact that I can only count a few that don't admit. Now I ask them straight away, have you been intimate? I can only count a few who will say, no, we haven't been. And they're serious about it. They've kept their purity ring like some we know. Most Christians are already rejecting the things that the Bible says is sin. But there's another and even more worse thing. And it is what I mentioned earlier. It's the sin of the Corinthian church. The sin of the Corinthian church started saying, look, we don't want to be judgmental. So in order to not be judgmental, we're going to start just accepting anyone and whatever they do. And isn't it wonderful? But look over here. We have this man, and he's sleeping with his father's wife. But look at how gracious we are. We welcome him. Now, they should be showing love to him, right? But do you remember what Hebrews also says? Hebrews says that the father disciplines those he loves. Parents, what are your kids like if you don't discipline them? Let me ask it a different way. What are the kids around you like who don't get disciplined? Ouch, right? You've seen them in the store, you've seen them in the neighborhood. They're out there running and doing whatever they want to do. Why? Because they're not disciplined. You know what that means? They're not loved. The Father disciplines those he loves. And here's what Paul is trying to warn us to do. He says, look, you got to come alongside of one another, and you got to be willing to discipline one another. You've got to be willing to exhort and comfort. You've got to be willing to say to the brother, like the young friend of mine who came to me and said, Bill, are you sinning? And this is at the time where I almost lost my marriage. Yeah, are you sinning, Bill? Now, what's your first temptation? If you're like Adam, what's your first temptation? Not me. First temptation is lie, right? Of course, now, the more you care about that person you're lying to, the more you're beating up and becoming insensitive, aren't you? The more you're destroying something inside yourself. That's the sound effect we needed during that song. Who knows you? No, I mean, who knows you? Who knows you well enough to encourage you when you're struggling in a battle with life? Who knows you well enough to challenge you to keep sharing Christ with someone that doesn't know him? To come alongside you and say, don't give up. Don't stop. You don't know when you're going to reach that person for Christ. Who knows your burdens well enough to say, here, let me help carry that? You know, at any time somebody's grieving, there's all kinds of people who will say, let me know if you need anything. And that's a very nice thing, isn't it? But you know what? The people that make the difference aren't the people who say, let me know if you need anything. The people that make the difference are the ones who simply do something. Hey, I know you maybe don't want to do this, but could you just come over and eat with us? You only have to stay as long as you eat, and you can leave as soon as you want to. You don't even have to talk to us. But I get a feeling you're not eating. Would you come over and eat with us? You drop in and say, I'd like to, I got a feeling you haven't been able to do much cleaning around the house, so I'd like to help clean the house. You're crazy. I know. It's because I love you. Okay. Who do you know well enough? Who knows you well enough to help carry your burdens and so fulfill the law of Jesus Christ from Galatians? Well, let me ask it a different way. Who will you listen to? Who will you listen to when you're starting to fall into sin? Who will you give your ear to? When you're starting to make choices that are harmful to you in your relationship with Jesus Christ. Who can speak straight with you like Jason spoke to his friend? Who can speak straight to you? In fact, that's one of the other things he said about Jason. He was simply straightforward, and you maybe didn't like it because he would be too straightforward. But you knew exactly what he was thinking, and he didn't hide anything, and he didn't mince his words. He said, Who will you listen to, and will you allow to be straight with you? Because you know what? If you don't have anyone, you're probably in danger, spiritual danger. And this is one of the reasons why, I got to tell you, this is one of the reasons why we have life groups. And somebody's saying, and then that's exactly why I'm not in a life group. I don't want to go to a group who's going to get to know me and they're going to know all the bad stuff about me. Yep, that's true. No, frankly, it's not. They're not going to know all the bad stuff about you because they're going to look at you in that life group and think, I wish I was like them. I'm messed up and they don't know it. I'm still trying to hide it because everyone's in there like with similar insecurities, huh? You know what? There's only one person who doesn't want you connecting to other people in the body of Christ, who doesn't want you encouraging and exhorting one another, who doesn't want you to have people around you who are going to help you not sin. There's only one person, and his name is not Jesus. Encourage one another to avoid the hardening of our hearts. The word that's used here is one that's supposed to happen continually. You don't just do it once. And who do you have next to you that you will allow to continually encourage your heart, continually speak to you? I mentioned this earlier, right? The word for hardening is the word sclerosis. Another Greek word. What does that sound like to you? Sounds a lot to me like that other part of arterial, what? Sclerosis, right? There it is. The hardening of the arteries, what? The arteries, right? We have spiritual hardening of our arteries that God says, look, you need to encourage one another so you don't get that hardening of your arteries. In his book, The Vanishing Conscience, John MacArthur observed in a chapter entitled, Hardened by the Deceitfulness of Sin, that sin defies and deceives the human conscience and thereby hardens the human heart. A sin-hardened heart grows ever more susceptible to temptation, pride, and every kind of evil. Unconfessed sin, therefore, becomes a cycle that desensitizes and corrupts the conscience and drags people deeper and deeper into bondage. On the cultural level, for example, we can see that as conviction of sin is silenced and the community conscience vanishes, society becomes more corrupt and more tolerant of more debauchery. Whoa. The rapid erosion of social standards regarding obscenity and moral propriety provides abundant evidence of this phenomenon. What was shocking and unacceptable only a decade ago is now standard fare on network television. Lewd humor that would have been judged inappropriate outside the locker room not so long ago is now the main attraction in children's entertainment. And I only need to mention some really old moldies, Simpsons and Beavis and Butthead and some others. And things are steadily growing worse. Everything that is vulgar, disrespectful, or illegal, they consider cool. And all that is good or sacred, watch out, they ridicule. I have a couple questions as we're starting to kind of wind down on this message. Are you an encourager? Are you the kind of person who takes time to get next to somebody else, to get to know them well enough that you can speak into their life? Are you an encourager? And by saying that, I'm not saying, are you standing up there telling them glittering generalities that they know aren't true? Oh, you're the most wonderful person in the world. I just am always so moved by how wonderful you are. And you're sitting there, ah. Okay. But are you the kind of person who's willing to come alongside of somebody else? On a rehearsal the other night, I got to tell you, I broke down in tears at one point. And it broke down at the point where it talked about this faithful generation that we, us old people, we're supposed to pass on something to the next generation, to the next generation, to the next generation. We're supposed to be passing something on to the younger, right? And I broke down because I started looking at the simple faith of a couple of guys I love. And as we're singing that song, it just became overwhelming as I started thinking about the simple faith that a couple of guys have shown and demonstrated here. Two young men who have been willing to come back from Irvine to be here to help us do worship this morning. Two young men who go the extra mile and who never complain, who I got to tell you, there's lots of times these guys were not wanted in our worship leadership. And they say, okay, yeah, okay, because we're not doing it for that. We're here doing this for the Lord. Simple faith. And I had to say thank you. Now, I'm not kind of it's constantly writing all kinds of notes, and always saying how wonderful you are. But there's some times that you just got to come alongside of somebody and say thank you. Are you the kind of person who can do that? Are you an encourager? And as I ask you that question, are you establishing the kind of relationships with other people where you could become an encourager? Have you put yourself in a place to be present when somebody's hurting? Or when somebody's hurting, do you can move away? Are you willing to risk having someone accuse you of being judgmental when you say, I love you enough to tell you, stop what you're doing? And when they want to react, they say, don't be judgmental. And this person who told me yesterday, that was just being judgmental. Every time somebody says that to you, they're being judgmental too, so don't let them off the hook. Do you care enough to attempt to keep someone from giving into sin? Did you hear that? Do you care enough about somebody else that you want to help keep them from falling into sin? Or do you just not care? Because see, that's part of the insensitivity, isn't it? That happens. Encouragers come alongside in love and they speak the truth because they love. Paul says, put on the full armor of God so that you can stand firm. He said that to Christians who were struggling to be strong. They were hurting, and he says, look, stand firm. What was he doing? He was paracleting the Ephesians. He was encouraging them. Teacher, I think this story was in Dear Abby some years ago, and I probably shared this with you before, but a teacher had an assignment in which she asked the kids in her little class, I think it was like first or second graders, she asked them to each write notes to the other kids in their class about things that they liked about them. She took those things home, compiled them all together, put them together in one envelope for each kid, and then and actually made a list, I think, put it all in one single list, and then gave those lists to each of the kids. The next day, she hands out the lists, and they started reading them. Wow. Someone turned to others and said, I didn't know that you liked that. I didn't know you appreciated that. Wow, thank you. Now here's where the story really gets amazing is a number of years later, and this is an old story, okay, I understand. One of the young men was killed in the war. And the teacher goes to the memorial. After the memorial, the parents come up to this teacher. And some of the other former students of the same teacher are all standing around there. And the parents come up and they said, we got to tell you that when our son was killed, he had the list that you gave out back in elementary school with him. And you don't know how much that meant to him all these years. Over here, one of the other students says, oh yeah, I carry mine with me as well. Another student comes up, oh yeah, me, I've got mine in my wedding book. Another one says, I've got mine in my diary. Another one says, I got mine, I keep it right on the bureau. And all these kids were saying how much these words of encouragement had meant to them. That teacher started crying and made a commitment at the end of that conversation. For the rest of her teaching career, she made sure she did those lists for each student. Are you an encourager? And my final question is this, are you open to encouragement? Are you open to it? This is where it gets stickier. Because are you open to somebody saying to you, I don't know how to say this to you, Bill, but I've seen something and I'm uncomfortable actually bringing this up to you. I think you're sinning. I'm so thankful Jim Yost loved me enough to say that. Been 30 years, but I still remember, and I'm so thankful. Are you open to encouragement? Take off the mask. Let some people see you. You know, you're probably not hiding it anyways. Let some people love you. And most of all, let Jesus love you. Jesus died for your sins. He came to take them away. He came to forgive them. He came to give you new life. And maybe you need to do what Jason Granger did a year ago. Because most of you know Jesus. But maybe you need to recommit your life to Jesus. You know if there's baggage in the way. You know if you're really loving God with your whole heart, mind, soul, and strength. You know if you're loving one another like Christ loves you. Are you open to the encouragement that the Holy Spirit wants to give you as he comes alongside of you? Sure could use a Kleenex. Thank you, ma'am. In a letter to the editor, I love this is a British newspaper. The guy writes in, "Why go to church? I have been attending services quite regularly for the past 30 years," he wrote. "And during that time, I have listened to no less than 3,000 sermons. But to my consternation, I discover I cannot remember a single one of them. I wonder if a minister's time might be more profitably spent on something else." The letter sparked many responses. One, however, was the clincher. "I have been married for 30 years.
Oh, no.
During that time, I have eaten 32,850 meals, mostly of my wife's cooking. Suddenly, I have discovered that I cannot remember the menu of a single meal. And yet, I received nourishment from every one of them. I have the distinct impression that without them, I would have starved to death long ago." Are you an encourager? Are you willing to become one? Do you accept encouragement? Are you willing to accept it?